I come from an army background in India actually, and have lived across the country, changing so many schools before I finally did my bachelor's from Delhi University. I worked in India for a couple of years post that in consulting with KPMG and in the internal management division for Goldman Sachs in Bangalore. And that's when I was working there, I realized that, a more international experience is missing from my studies or experiences. And I really wanted to be also at a managerial role. That, you, after a few years of working, you realize that managerial roles is where you can actually make a major difference. Additionally, I also realized that network is really important when it comes to your career and the direction that your career is going to take. It becomes a deciding factor in what you end up becoming at the very end. So all these things I realized that are something that I'm missing from my career journey till now. And that's why I thought that maybe an MBA is something that would help me achieve at least a few of these things, if not all. And I already always wanted to do an MBA. I also had an admit from ISB Hyderabad, their early admission scheme. But I realized that my motivations would probably be more fulfilled at an international school, something outside of India. So, just the thought of sitting in a classroom with peers from all over the world, from so many different countries, experiences, excited me so much that I thought I'll focus my energies outside India now. So that's where NUS came into being. And actually, in my first week at NUS, right, I remember a guest speaker, one of our alumni, telling us that MBA is done for one of three reasons, right? So there's either a change in location, a change in function, or a change in industry. So if we were to look at it this way, achieving one of these is definitely possible when you're doing an MBA, especially an international MBA. Achieving two of them is an uphill climb, but it's not impossible. Three is really, really tough. It's a very long shot. So in my case, if I were to look at it from this lens, I believe location change was primary because now I'm working as a management consultant in financial services, so that remained the same. Function changed to an extent because I got a more focused role, a more specialized role in financial services, while industry remained the same, financial services. So, as someone who's listening to us right now, I would say, think of it on these three lenses. What are you trying to achieve? And then accordingly, you should see if India makes sense for you or abroad, and which school abroad makes sense. Mine was actually a bit of a different experience because I did not even consider the West, honestly. It was something that I really did not want to study. I really didn't want to go away from home for that long a period of time. And in that year, so I joined in 2019, and that's when 6 months later COVID stuck, right? So it was, I think, in hindsight, a great decision because staying away from home, even from Singapore, it was really tough for 2 years not being able to meet family or anyone. So from the West, it would have been even longer. So I didn't even think of American schools, and that leaves very little choice because one of the top schools in the world are majorly in the UK, in the US, basically the West Hemisphere. So I thought of Singapore, or maybe there were a few universities in China, but NUS sort of stuck out to me because it's a really small program, and Singapore is just 4 to 6 hours away from India, from home, and it's also one of the more, I would say, economical program. It's almost the same cost of tuition as ISB, so all these things stood out to me, and it's one of the best ranked colleges in Asia around the world. So at that time, it was ranked, I think, number 13 or number 15 in the MBA rankings around the world. So it made a lot of sense. So I didn't even honestly apply to any other school. It was either going to be IFP or NUS for that year. Maybe in a few years, I would have applied somewhere else. But for me, NUS was it. And when it comes to location, if you think about Singapore, it's in the it's the financial capital of APAC at least, right? And the way things are going, the way we see world evolving over the next few years, Asia is going to be the focus for a lot of this business and especially for financial services. So it made sense that you are in the upward curve when it comes to this industry. So all these factors really decided for me that okay, I'm gonna look at Singapore and go for it. So the application process is very straightforward. You submit your scores through GMAC, exactly how you do for other colleges as well. Submit your motivational essays. They will give you topics, and there might be a couple of extra essays as well. Then there might be 1 or 2 rounds of interviews, and finally, then the decision is conveyed. I had actually completed my GMAT in my undergrad itself, so it was it was a bit early, and I had a decent score, 700 plus, so which sort of helped. But it's a major misconception that GMAT score is what matters when it comes to international MBAs, and I would like to tell you that that really is not the case. Not like how we see it in score-based exams in India, right? However, outside of India, it's not just GMAT score plays a role, yes, but not a major role. It's the essays and the profile that you've built, the experiences that you've had matter more than that, and of course your interviews, right? So I decided to apply in the first round of applications itself. Took about a month to write my essays. I remember there were 3 compulsory essays and 1 optional essay. So during that 1 month, I wrote my essays, asked my friends and family to review them to see if there's any issues, any changes, multiple rounds of reviews. So once I was happy with where my compulsory essays were, I took up the optional essay. So a quick tip for everyone, if you have an optional essay, go for it, but only go for it if you have something extra to say, something that is not in your resume, not something that you've written in your other essays, right? And write something that will stand out. I remember one of the essays I had was how do you define success? And I just said, I don't believe in success. That was my first sentence, right? And outrageous claims like this stand out. You have to obviously justify it. It has to be good, but you have to stand out because these application reviewers, they're looking at thousands of applications, and especially for NUS, they select only 100 out of them. The batch size is that small, so you really have to stand out from that. And another tip, we also had references, so get good references, right? Not people that might sound good on paper, but people who actually know you, who can vouch for you. Ideally, someone in a higher position, someone who you've worked with. And if they have an international candidature, like one of my bosses was working in Hong Kong in Goldman at the time, and I took his references. That really helps because that gives credibility for an international school. So all these things led up to the application. I remember doing a lot of mocks. So, especially for GMAT, right? It's just quant, and I mean, that's math and English. It's majorly just that. And all of us who've studied in an Indian education system have had a lot of exposure to this. So, it's really not that tough. It's just what your mindset is on the day, and how you attempt it, how you go about the paper is what matters, right? So what I did was, before I even started anything, I took a mock to see where I stand today. Before I even knew what GMAT is, what are the kind of questions. And once I had a base score, then I studied for a month, did my quant. And when I say studied, I actually just, they have those official guides, the GMAT OGs. I just did those 2 to 3 times. Every question 2 to 3 times, because it really does not come nothing comes out of that. So nothing beyond that comes to the exam. So I just did those OGs 2 to 3 times. And then I did mocks repeatedly. Every other day I did a mock exam, and how that helped was you just don't have to do a mock, you have to analyze where you're making mistakes, which questions are tough for you, and then you go back to the OGs and practice those questions a bit more. So that's how I did my GMAT. One key thing for GMAT is the worst thing, actually, good thing or bad thing, is that you select the date yourself. So I had a few friends who, continued this over 6, 7, 8 months, all that stress, and then they never really chose a date. And once they chose the date, they kept delaying it and so on. I would say do not do that. Just stick with a date. There is always the option to delay, but stick with a date. Give yourself a good timeline. Stick with it, see if you're able to do it. If not, you can just give it again. There's never an issue there. Even study plans for GMAT on Google, what do you do today? And it's catered to if you're a university student or if you're working, everything. So towards the last 1 month, I even looked at a crash course study plan on the internet, used that, and went for it. So I did take coaching in Time Delhi, but that helped to an extent. The major thing that they helped me with was they had Manhattan mocks at the time. So that resource is really good because it's tougher than the GMAT. So once you're able to do the tougher questions, even if your score is not that great, at least you'll be able to answer the easy ones. So that really helped. I mean, it was okay. It was a very straightforward process. The only key challenge for me was I had to give 2 interviews as compared to one, which was the common thing. And it usually happens because of a bunch of reasons. I realized that later. First of all, there's a lot of applications from India, right? From India, from China. So usually I would see, I heard that a lot of people from these nationalities had to give 2 interviews because the choice, there is so much, the sample size is so much, it's very tough to choose from there. So that was one. And actually second reason was I had very little, I won't say very little, I had experience on the lesser side, work experience when I was interviewing. So I actually applied when I had only 1.5 years of experience, and the minimum applying experience is 2 years, right? So I think they really wanted to make sure that we wanted to have Arshiya in our batch or not. One of the best things about the program is that it's so flexible, and I made good use of it. I on paper you need to finish it on 1.5 years, but I finished it in 2 years. And there's an option to even finish it in 3 years, right? Pace your courses as much as you want. And at the same time, if let's say you find a job in the first semester or second semester, you can always convert it to a part-time MBA. You can continue it for, let's say, 4 years. So that flexibility, and at the same time, I did 4 internships during my MBA. That's something that very few programs around the world allow you to do. 2 of them full-time. So 2 part-time MBAs, 2 full-time. So that, I had a few, I wanted to consider a few career options before. I wanted to try out a few options during my MBA before I went for another job. And I got to do that because of the internships in blockchain, in venture capital, in product management and startup studios, the early stage investments. So using those internships, I was able to experience them all and see where I fit in, what makes sense for me, and what could be a potential career after I graduate. Dorm experience was pretty great. We had sort of like a tiny apartment, like 4 girls, individual rooms, but with a common living room and so on, within university town. It's called U-Town Residences. So all these things, the great infrastructure, proximity to home, and still it's global enough that there's expats from all around the world living in Singapore. The variety of learning experiences that I had, all these things added up for NUS to be a great place.